My name is Diana Morales, a Senator of Administration for ASGCC, and with me tonight is Vice President Elise Dulai of Administration. We are so excited to bring you the first ever Learning and Professional Pathways Workshop Series in collaboration with Guided Pathways. We are joined by some amazing GCC faculty members today, but before we begin, I have a few announcements. We have interpretation and closed captioning services available tonight for our deaf or hard of hearing attendees. You have the option of pinning interpreter Joe Beth by clicking on the three dots on the box where their faces are and selecting pin video. We also have our captioner Denise, who will be doing closed captioning tonight. To turn it off, click the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen. This meeting will be recorded as well. However, we will be recording the speakers and not everyone else in the audience. We will be sending out a student survey at the end of the meeting. If you are here for extra credit, please fill this out since that is how we will report your attendance to your professors. Elise and I are so excited to be your moderators this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to her for a couple more announcements.
Thank you, Diana. So this event is split into two parts. The first part will be a presentation by our counselors Kevin Meza and Brianna Delay about the new Learning and Professional Pathways, or LPPs. The second part will be a Q&A by our faculty panelists, Dr. Richard Neufeld, who will be a little bit late, Kenneth Tiara, Keith Conover, and Thomas Ferguson. We have a few pre-prepared questions, but if you have any specific questions throughout the event, then please send them to me in the chat. Without further ado, I will be turning it over to Kevin.
Great, thank you, and thank you everybody for being here. Hopefully you'll learn something, maybe challenge you a little bit, kind of see what your options are, and maybe look at this whole major and career thing a little differently. I'm going to share the screen to go through our formal presentation here, and then let's see here. All right. Start from the top. Pretend you didn't see any of that, right? We don't have to give away all our good stuff. All right. Why are we here? Like, what's the point? Well, this presentation is to help you choose a major and career based on your interests and strengths using a guided pathways approach. Guided pathways approach is a way to streamline all the information that comes your way about college. It simplifies the college process, essentially. It doesn't make it necessarily easier in the classroom per se, but when you have a vision of where you're going, I think you get more motivation, and then you work on certain skills that are enhanced in the classroom. So it all is tied together. We were able to group majors together through something called LPPs, and we'll talk about that in a second. And when we're finished, the counselors are finished, we're going to learn directly from professors on how to turn your interests into skills in their fields. One of the big things that I learned when I was in college was something from a researcher named Donald Clifton, and that's to soar with your strengths and manage your weaknesses. A lot of people spend so much time focusing on what they're not good at, what their challenges are, and that's inefficient. What you want to see is what you're naturally talented at and enhance that. And anything that's not quite your fit, you maybe push that down in your priority. You know, you might want to balance it out a little bit, but focus on what your skills are. Enhance that. Now, I travel a lot. Each career that you have, there's perks to the job. Outside of working with students, we get summers off, and in summers I travel a lot. And I think it makes me a better counselor. I think it makes me a better educator because I see the world and then come back and share with you. One of the things I realized when I was traveling is, from ancient civilizations from today, society's based off the talents and interests of the population. So in every civilization known to us, there's artists, there's writers, there's builders, educators, musicians, athletes. People make clothes, textiles, and also health and sciences. And that's why we're here today for this LPP. You're going to find your fit. This is about not just health, but sciences, building, engineering, a combination of maybe a skill set that you've probably identified already. I think for this LPP, you kind of know if you're a science person or not. And that's limiting. Sometimes people get upset like, oh, the science person or not. It's more complex than that. But generally, you've been building a skill set throughout your life. You've been kind of maybe drawn to the sciences. There's actually 1,200 majors for you. So that could be daunting, right? It's just basically, what's your major? And it's like we're throwing a bunch of marbles at you, and you have to pick one up off the floor. That's a perfect marble for you, right? But this case, we basically put a jar of marbles, say, hey, these marbles probably line up with what your interests are. Here's pull this out. This is engineering, this is bio, this is physics, chemistry. Look in this little area. So we're trying to guide you towards a certain path. Your job is to also help us with the counselors and instructors to find your best fit, to talk to us and kind of develop your strengths. So again, we're really focused on identifying your interests and talents, then keep developing skills that enhance you. Keep going. You're always building your skill set. Hand it off to Brianna.
Yes, thank you. So this is an infographic that shows you the correlation between the level of education that you can get, ranging from less than a high school diploma to a master's, doctorate, professional degree, and the correlation in how much money, average, of course, it's not the golden rule, but how much money you potentially can make. And you'll notice at the bottom where it says less than high school, the earnings aren't very far in comparison to the professional degree. There is a very much of a difference there, a big variation. But again, this is not the golden rule. There's certainly people who have never graduated high school and make good money, and people who have professional degrees and maybe don't earn as much money. This is just the average, but it also connects it to unemployment. And you'll notice that the less education you have, the more vulnerable you're likely to be to becoming unemployed. And we saw that with the pandemic. Currently, people who have higher degrees, bachelor degree and higher, were more likely to keep their job because they were able to work remotely and things like that. There was that difference. Again, not the golden rule, but something to keep in mind when you are looking at profession. You want to find one that is foolproof and can benefit you in the long run. Next slide, please, is the question that we always get as counselors. Will I make money in this major? What's the most profitable major? And now that we have these LPPs, these learning and professional pathways, is my pathway going to lead me to XYZ number of dollars? The answer is maybe. We don't have a guaranteed answer here, but that being said, there are certain majors that can impact how much money, how much you're making as starting out in professional. Those majors are computer science, business, engineering, as some examples. But there's other instances where you may make more money over your lifetime versus just your starting salary. And those kinds of majors are English, philosophy, anthropology, psychology. It's not necessarily so important what your major is what you do with what you learn, what you do with the skills and talents that you acquire. That is really what we want to highlight is, are you getting those skills? On our next slide, we have our employability skills. If you're not developing skills in college, you're not going to be as employable after college. You can't just expect, I got a degree, now I'm going to get a job. You have to put some work into it, and that starts now. It doesn't start when you graduate. In college, you will be working on some of these skills. They're naturally built into your classes, such as written skills, verbal skills, but there's other skills that you may need to work on individually and start building those up. These are our employability skills. Some people call them transferable skills. But it's really important that you're able to do things like solve problems. Employers don't want people that are going to come to them I have this problem and you don't have a solution. If you're going to present a problem, you need to have a solution. Having a strong work ethic and initiative, those show passion. When you're passionate about what you're doing for your career, for your job, even if it's not your career, it's just a side job for money. If you have passion, you're going to work hard. You're going to have initiative, and those things stand out. That's going to be a good recommendation later on. Your leadership skills, analytical skills, being detail oriented, that one is not necessarily one that comes natural to everybody. Some of us have to work a little bit harder at that. And if you know that, like Kevin was saying, know your weaknesses, know where you need to build on to be a little bit stronger. And then last on this list, and it's intentionally last, is the technical skills. Employers would like you to know the technical software and things like that that they use at their company, but those can be taught. They can teach you those. All the other skills that are listed here are far more important, and strongly recommend start working on those now. Now, we are going to be presenting some ideas today. These are conversation starters. They're meant to get you thinking. We want you to start thinking critically. That starts today. It's based on two career-oriented theories or ideas. The first is Holland codes. You may have heard of strong interest inventory or RIASEC before. If you haven't, you will by the end of today. And then the other one is the multiple intelligence theory, with some revisions, and we're going to get into those in a few moments.
Okay, perfect. So for learning, and this is a new concept for our campus, and we're here to talk about it. So learning professional pathways, as I kind of hinted at before, I'm going to read this just so I get everything. So learning professional pathways group majors by common subjects, careers, and coursework. GCC's 8 LPPs will encourage students to select a pathway towards a degree or certificate, and provide counselors and professors tools to help students stay on and complete their path. And this is helpful because we can have workshops like this, putting resources together, more guest speakers. We could maybe even tailor resume workshops specifically to, for example, STEM. This is just a really great way to group everything. We have other LPPs, obviously at Glendale. This is just one of them. Now, the interesting thing with STEM is you can actually major in the STEM field, or you can major in something else and still be in STEM, because for grad school, for med school, pharmacy, you don't have to necessarily major in the STEM fields, just as long as you do well in your STEM classes, which is typically like physics, biology, chemistry, calculus, depends on what it is. So there's some flexibility in this, and I might probably go through that a little bit later on too. I do want to backtrack a little bit because you're the science and technology people and research. So this source for income and major, you can look it up on your own, and you can see the correlation there, the stats on that, the average income of different majors. And there's some great graphs. So this is like the graphs group, right? So you'll see some great graphs of math and statistics. So definitely get a chance when you to look. All right. So for this, specifically for STEM, these are the kinds of questions that we want you to ask yourself. And hopefully this validates you that this is the right path. And if you read this, you're like, that's not me, that's okay too. This is part of the exploration, right? You just read this, you click and you leave. I guess I would say stay to the end, but still, we want you to get thinking about these things, right? So are you a problem solver and innovator? Do you like to take things apart to see how they work? Do complex systems like chemical bonds, the human body, motors, computers fascinate and inspire you? GCC Pathways prepare students to transfer to four-year institutions and go on to become engineers, mathematicians, medical professionals, researchers, and scientists. And of course, a degree from Glendale, the associate's degree, you can get work employment there too, certificate. So hopefully this is the right fit for you, and you're like inspired by this. Hand it over to Brian.
Yes, I was just typing the link to what you were just referencing into our chat, so I put that there so somebody could access that. Yes, so we have a lot of different STEM programs at GCC. They are listed here. something for everyone from architecture to biology, all kinds of engineering, mathematics, sciences, and CAD, a very, very hot technology. A lot of employers are seeking computer-aided design technology for a lot of not just engineering, but a lot of different professions as well. A lot of these programs, they do lead to transfer. That's part of this specific pathway. The STEM pathway is getting students onto that next step. A lot of you need bachelor's or higher degrees for a lot of these careers, but there's also, we have a wide range of career education programs as well. And even if you know you want that higher degree, let's say you want to go to medical school, you can use some of those CE programs that are STEM related, such as getting an EMT certification or EKG. And then with that certification, you can start getting experiences. And I think Kevin's going to talk about it a little bit more later on, but you need to have an edge. If you're applying to these medical schools or certain programs, you need to have experiences to talk about. It's not just your GPA, it's not just your major, but you need to have something that stands out. And those experiences really help you stand out. So we are going to talk about the RIASEC, the Holland Code. And I want you to, I'm going to briefly describe a few of these, but at the end of it, I want you to write down the top 3 that you relate with. We are the STEM group. So most commonly, students relate with realistic, which is working with your hands, very hands-on type practical experiences. Investigative is another common one for STEM, which is, if you can imagine, a lab type setting, thinking logically through things, being very curious and wanting to dissect information, lots of research involved in this. The third one that speaks mostly to STEM is conventional. You have to be very organized and practical, efficient, very orderly in memorizing information and being able to retrieve that information for later use. A lot of times you don't have time to go research the information. You have to make a quick decision right there. So being able to categorize and retrieve that information physically as well as mentally, conventional is a really common theme as well. And I would argue that social has its place in here. For some professions that fall into the STEM field, you're going to be working with people, at least in the medical professions, maybe not as much for our engineering or mathematics. But certainly, if you're going to be working with people, you need to have some sort of social skills. So that may be an area. You may have that interest in helping people, but you do it in a way that isn't necessarily working with people. You do it in a way that is advancing technology, or whatever it looks like for you. And then the other 2 that maybe you relate with as well. There's artistic, which are people who are very creative, very independent thinking. Originality is very big with artistics. And then enterprising, who are outgoing, energetic, business-oriented people. So just take a moment and write down the top 3. You could just write the letter. So R for realistic, I for investigative, and keep that in your mind. There is a link here so you can go take an actual assessment through our Career Center at GCC. So you could get a little bit more information on whether you're accurate on what you think you relate to, or if you assess a little bit differently. And on the next slide, we do have the RIASEC again, but in a little bit different way. And in this way, it tells you what these people do, what they're known for. Our realistic people are the doers. Our investigative are the thinkers. Artistic are the creators. Social are the helpers. Enterprising are persuaders. And the conventional are the organizers. So just keep in mind your top 3. And this is the Holland Code interest based on the different LPPs that we have, the Learning Professional Pathways at GCC. And you'll notice the STEM, the 3 codes that are listed next to it are realistic, investigative, and conventional. Now, if you listed ones that are not there, maybe you put enterprising as well instead of conventional, that's okay. Maybe you're going to own your own engineering manufacturing company or something. You can have other themes that is perfectly fine. But more often than not, the STEM, people that are in STEM professions tend to have these interests, the hands-on, the thinking through, and the organizing. And if you found yourself thinking of other codes, you can also see what some of the other LPPs, which interests they fall under as well.
Perfect. I want to talk about multiple intelligences. In psychology, there's some debate if it's intelligence or not, so the research is inconclusive. I don't want to get us caught up in that, but I want you to think about it as talents. What are you naturally talented at that you've been kind of identify yourself as? And I think that kind of hits home for a lot of people. And a shortcut is calling you smart. Your music smart, visual smart, interpersonal smart, things like that. Again, it's a conversation piece, and to see which works for different pathways that we have. So here's the different ways. Again, some people have musical talent. I appreciate music, just can't play anything. I like to see rhythm, but can't remember routines and everything. You know, so we have to just identify what because you, without even thinking about it, you have been building this throughout your life. You've been taking a little bit more attention, reading certain things more, practicing certain things that you like to do. You don't even realize how skilled you've been, all the skills you've been developing. And that's something for you to really kind of reflect upon. What if now you can learn other skills? I don't want you to feel like you're trapped in this, but what have you already developed? And if you do want to learn something, another skill, it might be just a little bit more of a challenge, something that can be done, but maybe not as natural. Here's another way to look at it. Like I said, picture smart, body smart, music smart, things like that. It's just, again, this is another way to kind of look at these things. Skill development is huge, lining up with what you've been doing already, particularly for STEM fields. You generally have been identified early on if you like it or not. Now, in other countries, because there is no, are you good at math or not? In other countries, it's just work, it's just effort. But in the United States, we have this idea you're good or not, which is false, but that's how you've been raised this whole way. So it's kind of hard to undo that. So if you ever want to talk about that as a counselor, we can talk about that and education development, right? That's a bigger philosophy, but we just want to make sure to cover some of these bases here. So for this pathway, there could be more than this, but logical, mathematical, and naturalist. So for like, if you go outside, you're a biologist, you know, I see a tree, a biologist sees the type of tree, the type of roots, all these other things about it, right? I just don't see those things and cells and all those other patterns and logical mathematical stuff. I haven't developed as much as other things, I would say, right? Now, just a quick thing before we go at the end of the counseling part. This is for med schools, and because a lot of people think they have to major in sciences to go to med school, and that's not the case. Med schools, and this goes for pharmacy, dental, they're looking for intellectual diversity with students. So the top part is the amount of applicants that they have. And then the bottom part is how many people were admitted to med school. This stat comes out every year. And you can see biological science majors, their average GPA in their sciences is 3.67. And actually humanities majors, their average GPA is 3.63. So the humanities major stood out more in the application process, actually had a lower GPA in the sciences. So I'm not trying to tell you to switch your major, but I just want you to expand your range of what you're interested in. Because look on the biological sciences majors, 30,000 people applied. Look at the English majors, humanities, only 1,700 applied. So it's just trying to be creative in what your natural talents are, major in what you enjoy, supplement that with your pre-med, pre-pharmacy, pre-dental engineering classes. Engineering is a bit different, as I catch myself. Engineering is definitely more, you need more background in that, definitely, to catch up. But most of the health science fields, you can supplement that as you go through. And work on your writing skills and public speaking. That's a big part now of med school. Can you communicate effectively? In fact, I think psych and sociology are now part of the MCAT exam. So I hope this opened up some ideas. Of course, we threw a lot of stuff at you, a lot of theory, a lot of perspective. So the point is, follow up with us in the counseling department, whether it's a career center. And then right now, the professors will add to what we're saying or correct it. This is a conversation. We can always learn from each other in these presentations. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. Now on to our Q&A portion of the evening. If you have any questions, please send them to Elise in the chat. And we are honored to be joined by some amazing faculty members this evening. I'll be turning it over to them to introduce themselves. Now to Professor Conover.
I'm a professor of biology at Glendale College and the biology division chair. And I teach the first semester biology class for biology majors. So anyway, so all the people thinking that they're going to transfer to four-year colleges and universities to be, well, not thinking, but planning on transferring as biology majors, you know, take my class. But a lot of other people that are interested in, you know, allied fields take it as well. So we get people that some of them are going into other health professions. Some students want to be researchers, and so there's quite a diversity of students that sign up for my class. Were there questions or?
No, just another professor, maybe Professor Newfield, if you'd like to go next.
All right. Hi. Sorry, late. I just finished class. So I'm Professor Neufeld. I teach math here at GCC. And sorry, I joined late. What are we supposed to just brief introduction? Is that?
Yeah, just brief introduction, you know, what you teach and just anything else about yourself.
Sure. Yes, like I said, I teach math. I teach all the math classes here, everything from our developmental math 90, which is intermediate algebra, up through calculus, linear algebra, differential equations. I've been at Glendale for 4, 5. No, this is my 5th year now at GCC. So yeah, that's.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, Professor Tiara. I'm not here. Okay, how about Professor Ferguson?
Yes, hello. My name is Tom Ferguson, and I teach. I'm an adjunct professor for engineering technology. I teach the engineering design and drafting classes, along with engineering computer-aided design, the CAD classes, here at Glendale College, and I have been a professor here for 20 years. Prior to that, I spent 20 years in the industry, primarily in military and aerospace at Lockheed Skunk Works, working on a variety of different stealth fighter programs. And I do have environmental, civil, you know, besides mechanical design is my primary focus. And, you know, related to what Brianna and Kevin were talking about earlier, I would like to kind of add to the idea of skills, where I think it's extremely important that students gather skills along the way through their education so that they have a better opportunity to get an internship, because there's no substitute for experience within that field.
Thank you so much for those introductions. So for our first question of the evening, a lot of students at the community college level are undecided, and we want to know, how did you decide on your area of study and what school did you go to? Starting with Professor Conover.
When I was in high school, I had a couple of biology classes that I really liked. And so, you know, I've always been very interested in how things work, you know, exploring the natural world. And I had these high school biology classes that I enjoyed a lot. And so when I went to college, I just, that's what I wanted to study more of. So I did my undergraduate work at UC San Diego, and got a bachelor's degree there. And I took a year off, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I decided I wanted to study biology some more. So I went to graduate school, and the I went to UCLA, earned a PhD, and I think in your study of science field, you're really committing yourself to lifelong learning. There's always new advances. You're trying to keep up with it, and that's one of the great things about teaching is that there's this biology, especially I would say among the sciences. There's just so many advances that are happening all the time, and I learn things every week, and I bring them into my class and share them with students. This morning or yesterday, I'm talking about the new vaccine developments for the COVID-19, and it's relevant to what we're learning in class. So anyway, I have a love knowing how things work and understand. Very curious about the natural world, and I think that's serves someone very well in a STEM field.
Thank you so much for that answer. What about you, Professor Neufeld?
Yeah, sorry, the question was, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Of course. How did you decide on your area of study, and what school did you go to?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I studied math in school. I'll say this, in high school, math and science were my favorite classes in high school. And I knew when I went to college, I wanted to do some type of, I guess STEM wasn't really a buzzword then, but I knew I wanted to do some type of like science or engineering. I didn't know math though. In fact, I thought I wanted to be an engineer. Both my parents were engineers, and they had a huge influence on me growing up. And yeah, definitely what Keith said, like I was always very curious. I love trying to kind of figure out how things worked. I would always like take things apart. Like when I was really little, I would like always play with my dad's tools in the garage and like take things apart and like try and build stuff. So just loved kind of tinkering with things. And so, yeah, I thought I wanted to be an engineer. So I went to school at UC Irvine, and I started out undecided. I went in completely undecided, but knowing that I was going to go into engineering. And so, taking the typical the freshman course load, physics, calculus, computer science classes. And then I think after my second year, oops. So I think after my second year, I switched officially to a math major. I don't know why math specifically. I mean, I was taking a lot of math courses, and I was doing well in them. Not that it was easy, but I enjoyed, studying math and working on my math homework. And it was kind of, I think that at one point, I was kind of looking at the catalog and figuring out what classes I'd have to take the next semester. And, I realized like, well, I'm kind of like going to be like done with my math. And I was just kind of curious, like, but there's more math out there to be studied. And so part of it was just kind of curiosity and kind of, I enjoyed the subject. And so I switched to math, and yeah, I don't regret it. I definitely enjoy having studied math. So I graduated from college in 2008, which was kind of a difficult year to find a job. So after I graduated, I applied to so many jobs and nothing. And kind of on a whim, I decided to go to grad school, which is probably not a good reason to. I had some friends who were applying, and I said, oh, okay, well, we'll see. I got rejected from everywhere. So at the time I was applying to PhD programs, I got accepted to one school, but they weren't going to fund me, and it was on the other side of the country. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. So I was kind of like really not sure what to do. So like really last minute, I decided to apply for a master's program at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. And they, for whatever reason, accepted me. And so I did my master's at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and that was a wonderful experience. If there's any students here thinking about where to go to school, where to transfer, I mean, obviously Irvine and Cal Poly are both very good, but I can only say good things about Cal Poly. Just an excellent experience there. Just the faculty are just wonderful. Yeah, so that's that.
Thank you so much. My best friend actually goes to Cal Poly and she says a lot of great things about it too. So it's nice to know that that's a good school. Moving on to Professor Ferguson.
Okay, well, I'm kind of an anomaly here. What I wanted to mention is that I grew up, I was very talented with, art and, I was big into model building as a kid. My dad, who was a World War II veteran, was, very good. He worked in engineering at US Borax, was a chemical company. My mom was engineering. They're both non-degreed, and so am I actually. And she working for AT&T. But I loved model building and art and drafting, design. Through high school, I was, we're going back to the early to mid 70s. I had, a 70 Boss 429 Mustang, part of the all 60s muscle club, muscle car stuff. And I used to work on that, tearing the engines apart, putting together, engines, cams, headers, learning a lot of stuff about, mechanical design, fasteners, lubricants, everything with that, and used to go out and drag race here at Irwindale, which used to be a quarter mile drag strip back in the day. It's now an eighth mile. And also, which is probably taboo here to talk about, but was firearms, machine guns. I used to get involved with a lot of the complex mechanisms with those, designing those, working on them, and also going to Arizona and having fun with them. But I never actually knew what I wanted to do, and I never graduated high school because I was just not interested in anything at that time. But I was very talented with design, and as working as a mechanic after high school for Pacific Bell, my supervisor pushed me to get involved in engineering, and so I remember putting together something, and I got hired at Singer Libroscope, which used to be in Glendale, California, down by Sonora, which is now part of the Lockheed division. Working there, I got my first drafting job working with Naval Fire Control Systems. And then I moved on to Hughes Aircraft, and I moved up to a junior engineer at Lockheed Skunk Works in the early 80s, and then got promoted to an engineering designer, where I spent most of the rest of my career, through the 90s, finishing up with the F-22 Raptor fighter. I was in R&D at that time, research and development, and won the contract. Actually, the test pilot who I knew for the first flight of Ship 1 on the F-22 was Dave Ferguson. We couldn't find any relations, but I worked with that. And then after getting out of Lockheed, I went and worked in environmental fields, with doing things for oil tank cars on your railway tank cars, cleaning systems, large centrifuges, and then did kind of some self-autonomous agricultural equipment, and also some civil engineering projects for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. But going back to this, these were again, what Kevin and Brittany had mentioned at the beginning. I had a series of pragmatic skills, and I was fortunate, probably for the time, that I was talented and I had skills and I had some intellect. But it's something that obviously today doesn't work in a lot of cases, and a lot of the places, including like say Lockheed Skunk Works, very high-end aerospace military, complex, along with Boeing and some of the other ones. You can't even get in now as an engineer without having that degree. And the thing is I am not a proponent here of the avenue that I took by any means. Getting the most in education, especially with math, in many, many subject areas, and disciplines is, number one. So if you do have a math aptitude, it's something to really move forward at a university level, because it will definitely help you out down the road. And anyway, I kind of went a different route, but like I said, I have always been employed my whole life, fortunately. And but again, I bring a lot of experience to my classrooms that I teach within, to my students and within my classes, because of my broad-based background in the engineering field.
I want to party with you, man. You're jet planes and shooting guns off in Arizona, man. That sounds good to me. It sounds like perks of the job,
Yeah, it's fun, definitely. And I just, it's interesting because I would have never thought about being an instructor without probably traveling the avenue I did for the first 20 years of my career. And there are a lot of job opportunities, and I've placed hundreds of students in jobs that have gone through my classes and transfer, where they've transferred to university, which a lot of the classes do transfer, even at the skill-based levels. And I'm a big proponent of the CAD programs. Here for engineering, we have the SolidWorks and the AutoCAD here, and they are taught and used at the universities. So when you are going to be on a project there, we're doing a full comprehensive CAD programs here. And so the students that take the classes here, even if it isn't recommended, or maybe the advanced courses don't transfer, I highly recommend them, because so many of the students that I've spoke to in the past, previous students of mine that have gone on, they're all working now, or they moved on to the university. They've been way ahead in accomplishing project designs and everything else, because they've been, very fluent with the CAD programs and, designing their projects. Plus, the thing is that they've made themselves available much more, I should say, appealing for companies when it comes to internships, because they have a skill to offer. Now, in the case of math, like I said, I think math is fascinating. My brother was fantastic at math, and he, back in the 70s, he went through Glendale College and completed all his calculus courses here prior to going to university, when he was in high school. And I think it's, the physics, the chemistry, the mathematics, they're extremely important. And so I just, but again, having these skill sets for an internship, because again, you're not going to be asked to do a calculus problem by hand at a company. You're going to have to use some kind of computer equipment. So if you're going to be solving and doing, stress analysis with ANSYS or NASTRAN, and you're a higher level math person, well, the thing is you'd want the math foundation with all the calculus, and then physics, of course, and then depending about chemistry, how that's going to tie into your discipline. But having that, and then taking some of the higher end engineering courses with statics and dynamics, so that you're able to calculate different loads, stresses, thermodynamics. There's a variety of different things. And at my level with doing design work, you're going to have to know some form of software, whether that's going to be CAD, it's going to be some type of simulation analysis, thermal analysis. And then the same thing would probably apply, which probably the other instructors like Mr. Conover, and I don't know if Tom Voden is still within our, is still here, but I was going to say, even in math, the importance of that.
Thank you so much for all your guys' responses. To move on, beginning with Professor Neufeld for this question, what skills would you expect an individual in your field to develop by the time they graduate?
So I guess maybe, well, okay, an obvious answer would be analytical thinking skills, being able to take a problem, analyze it. But honestly, I think from my personal experience, I think communication is probably the biggest skill I've developed as a math major, especially in higher level mathematics. When you study higher level pure mathematics, you're studying these very abstract concepts that don't necessarily apply in the real world. And so being able to communicate these really abstract ideas is just so key. One of my favorite classes I took, and perhaps the most practical, was called Methods of Proof. So this is kind of a transition course from your lower division to your upper division math. And this is where you learn how to read and write a mathematical argument. But honestly, the skills you learn in reading and writing a mathematical argument, they apply just for writing in general. I would say, yeah, communication, reading, and especially writing. It's always weird, people say like math, but I really think math has made me a much better writer than I ever was. In math, it's all about keeping things to the point, saying what needs to be said, nothing more, nothing less. So in terms of skills, yeah, besides the obvious, critical thinking, analytical thinking, one that's often overlooked is your communication and writing skills are so key in mathematics, and you really develop those and hone those in really well as a mathematics major. And I think Tom, I saw kind of a little head nod there, so I think he would agree with that.
Okay, what about Professor Conover? What would you expect somebody to learn in your field? Or skills to develop?
Yeah, and I think the part of the question was, when you graduate, but so do you mean graduating from Glendale College? Because I mean, it's a continual process. You're not going to have finished, acquiring these skills here. But I've come to realize in recent years that communication skills are the most important. I remember we've had medical school recruiters come talk to students before, and they certainly emphasize that, and they're telling the students that they need to read a lot and read challenging material. And for the students I see, many of them want to go to medical school or be pharmacists, and this communicating with patients and other healthcare professionals that you're going to end up working with, you need to have really, really great communication skills. Critical thinking is important. There's lots of ideas, treatments, medical treatments, quackery that people talk about, and you need to be able to look at scientific papers, evidence to assess the quality. And so I'm trying to help my students acquire those, in my classes. But it's something that most of the students are planning on going to, getting bachelor's degrees and then going to either graduate school or professional school. So they're going to be working on these skills, their whole time, and even beyond when after they start working in whatever occupation they get into, they'll be working on these skills.
Thank you so much. For our next question, we're going to start with Professor Neufeld, and then we'll get on to everybody else. But you talked specifically about your experience in not getting accepted into the programs or the jobs that you wanted to due to the job market. So do you have any advice for students on how to deal with failure in the STEM area? Failure or setbacks? Failure or setbacks?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, STEM it's hard. Math is hard, and it requires a lot of work. I mean, I love math. I genuinely love it, and that doesn't mean it's easy for me though. I've spent so many hours in the library as a student, and even still today as a teacher, a lifelong learner, I still do read and try to keep up with not the most recent mathematical research, but I try to keep up. But yeah, it's hard. When yeah, when I was applying to graduate schools, I thought I wanted to be a mathematician, like a researcher, working at a four-year university, you know, publishing. And so I was like, well, I got to get a PhD to do that. And I applied to some PhD programs, and yeah, I didn't get accepted to them. And yeah, I was applying to jobs as well, and it was tough. Yeah, I moved back home for a year after college, living with my parents. I was just tutoring. Just put like an ad on Craigslist, and I had was tutoring a couple of students for like the SAT or something. And like I said, I was really fortunate to be accepted to Cal Poly. And even there, that was tough as well. I tell all of my students this story about how I genuinely almost flunked out of grad school. And when students tell me, like, oh, if I fail this exam, I go, well, let me tell you about failing an exam. But yeah, it's hard. In graduate school, we've got several sets of examinations: written qualifying examinations, comprehensive exams, and if you don't pass those, you're out. There's no consolation. And so yeah, there was one exam in particular, I wasn't able to pass it, and so I had one more attempt at it, and if I couldn't pass it, then it's just donezo. So it's hard, and yeah, but I don't know. I'm saying all these bad things, but no, it's good. It's very rewarding, because when you do figure it out, when you do solve the problem, just that feeling is just so high. And when I finally did pass all my quals, it's the best feeling in the world. And I would say, like, you know, I didn't do it alone. Like, it's so important to, like, you know, go to your professor's office hours, like seek out help. Like, I spent so much time in the tutoring center, in my professor's office hours, with my peers. We would spend all day and all night too, just working through the homework, trying to figure out the problems. And that feeling you get, like, when you solve a problem and you figure it out, like genuinely figure it out, it's so rewarding. So yeah, despite all the adversity, like, yeah, you just keep doing it. You know, you're gonna get that job eventually. You know, it's I don't know what to say. You just keep at it. I guess I was very lucky. The fact that I was able to, the fact that I did get accepted, and I guess the fact that I did pass my exams. But I guess it's not really luck. You just kind of prepare for it. You got to study. You do well, and yeah. All right, I've been talking too much. I'll let someone else talk.
Thank you, Professor Neufeld. I think that was really insightful, actually, because STEM is a very competitive field, and math especially, given the job market right now. Professor Ferguson, do you have any advice on how to deal with failure or setbacks?
I just unmuted here. Boy, I don't know. I just, like I had mentioned before, I am definitely not the poster child for a college or university type of professor with the experiences that I mentioned that I went through. But I guess, you know, just having that determination moving forward with, you know, with what you like to do, I think that's one of the most important things, is, you know, continuing and from what I mentioned before, continuing with, you know, education in the form of whether it's, you know, learning, you know, your particular skills, the academic skills, you know, math, chemistry, I guess, you know, if we're talking about STEM, math, chemistry, physics, and such, along with any other skill-based courses. And, you know, whatever you really, you know, like to do is what you should follow. I understand that, you know, you have to make a living. And so picking a discipline that you do like is important. But at the same time, I think that if you're doing what you like to do, I think that is one of the most important things. And again, just probably, even as Mr. Conover had mentioned, you know, it's kind of a continuing process of learning learning skills. And then even for myself, there's new software updates, kind of continuing moving, forward with that, and having that mindset.
And I can jump in there as a counselor, and I'd say, first identify as soon as you're identify before you're struggling, right? You want to get study groups together. You want to use tutoring on campus, because usually by the time you're too far behind. So at the very beginning, set that up. Know that a lot of these classes are very challenging. Know that, realize that, and find a group of people that you trust. A good study group, I feel, is like 3 to 5 people that you trust, and you divvy up the work, push together, study. And even in times of COVID right now, you can Zoom these things a lot easier to do that right now. But push yourself, learn techniques. There's a lot of YouTube supplemental things on there. A lot of lectures are online from different professors. You can maybe add to your knowledge base. So there's a lot of supplemental materials is really big. Peer influence, again, through study groups, tutors on campus that we have. These types of majors are, you can't just, not that I could do that in my major, but you can't just sleep for a week and show up again in class and pick up, right? If you miss a day or two, they're speaking a whole different language. You're like, what is that, right? So you have to be on point, on game, do your homework every day, and do homework in advance, right? Skim chapters. There's a lot of study skills that you would definitely need to employ, because maybe you've been able to go this far, kind of studying a little bit, but as we progress from here and in the university level, you have to find a way to manage your time and do all these things so you don't fail out or to drop these classes and fail and things like that. So be prepared.
I have a couple of follow-up comments on this failure thing, if I may. I was planning on just listening, but you've sucked me in with this question, Elise. And following up on Richard's thoughts, I don't know. I totally agree with everything, and I am a big proponent of what Tom talks about with like practical skills. And there's something though about math. There's something paradoxical about it, and maybe it's all STEM. Maybe it's I don't know. There's something in it that I never feel like I know anything. There's this weird paradox. Second year of grad school, I felt hopeless because I thought there's no way I'm going to know what these fifth year students know. And then there was this fifth year student that told me, and it's like, I'm only 3 years away. He said, well, that's because you're having the second year dilemma right now. And the second year dilemma is like, there's too much to learn and there's no way that I'm going to get there. And then wait till you're in your fifth year and you'll have that dilemma, which is what I had on the cusp of defending dissertation time and realizing I don't know anything at all. I don't feel like I know any more. So the problem is that the failures are really milestones in a transformation. And there are a few fields that show you that. STEM tends to show you that a lot more, because every time you survive that long stretch of persistent struggle, and then you have that moment of like, aha, clarity, wow, it's so short-lived because all it does is increase your ability to communicate to the point that you now understand 10 more questions that you can't answer. So there's a certain, like, I don't know what I don't know, ignorance is bliss scenario that math will systematically strip you of. And then the other thing is there's this issue that we have to go through, and in order to tap into this level that folks are talking about, communication and critical thinking, on the front end of these fields, it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like knowing a bunch of facts. And then somehow your professors are operating in between the facts. They're operating in the relationship between the facts, and they don't care about the facts. And to the point where you're actually rewarded in a way for forgetting as a mathematician, because that forces you to think about the connections between the facts, and that's where your thinking lives. Whereas the students that we grow up with in K-12 that are quote unquote good math students are really, and I was one, I'll admit, was really about compliance and good memory. And so I say that was a blessing in grade school. It was a curse. And I didn't know what was going to happen about senior year of college, because at that time I was like, oh my God, I can't remember everything that I've known about how to be a student and who I am and my whole ego tied up in what this is had to be sort of stripped away, because I realized I was doing the whole thing wrong, and there was no way to get there except through that systematic failure that eventually teaches me, oh, this is not about memorizing at all. This is why, I was so annoyed when the teacher said, no, you don't have to memorize any of that stuff. You have to know it. And I'm like, what's the difference? No, it's because I live in the space between the facts. And there's a systematic process that's tied to failure that strips down your sense of intelligence and your sense of what it means to be someone who's smart in this field or whatever it would be. And you will have moments where you see that your mode of operation is different than it was before. Those are the things to celebrate. Finding the right answer is really short-lived, is a good high. Feels good, you got to celebrate it, go have a little party. Know that soon after, the hangover of realizing you don't know much more than you thought you didn't know will come. So I don't know. There's a bit of philosophy in here.
Professor Conover, do you have any advice from the biology department?
Well, I'd agree with what Tom and Richard said. One thing I think that maybe they didn't mention was that I was helped a lot by a mentor. And so I was an adjunct instructor, community college instructor for longer than I intended to be, that I wanted to be. And I applied for lots of jobs. And I was fairly selective. I didn't, there was lots of places where I didn't think I would enjoy living, so I didn't really apply there. But I applied for quite a few jobs and got second interviews and so on before I finally got, the full-time job I have now. And so the friend, mentor, just helped me in lots of ways. But one of the ways was, he encouraged me to broaden my education, acquire new skills, and I already had a PhD in biology, and I took an anatomy class at community college so that I would, and that helped when I was teaching. I never taught anatomy, but I taught general biology, and they were doing dissections and things that helped me. And then I also I became a docent at the Natural History Museum, and I was leading field trips and things. That came up in my interview at Glendale, and we have a nature reserve, and that was a useful thing to be able to tell them that I had experience, leading public tours in nature reserves and things. So anyway, having someone to kind of help you assess your skill set and how you can improve it, that can be a really valuable thing. And also offer encouragement to just keep trying rather than giving up. It'd be easy to give up. It helps to have someone that's encouraging you to keep trying.
I'd like to mention something. And second, what Mr. Conover had mentioned about mentors. For myself, again, being a never finishing high school, never having a degree, but being fortunate enough to have the talents and intellect that I did for, mechanical design, mechanical aptitude, that the mentors within industry that I had from the first job, I worked with a Hungarian engineer, and I remember Joe Sanavani, an older guy that was actually injured during World War II. And he helped me along so much with, all the different applications in engineering design, manufacturing, just a lot of other things like this. And so I think it's extremely important. I'm kind of a beneficiary of other people's high intellect and education working in the workplace. And then a friend of mine still today is retired now, ended up was one of the chief executives at Lockheed Skunk Works. Him and I worked together as engineers. I was an engineering designer. He was the group engineer. And he was not only a very good friend of mine, but he was a mentor to me. And that helped me along with, a few other engineers along the way in the different fields. And where these people really helped me out, spent a little extra time explaining things that I had not, been educated in or didn't know. And it was, very beneficial. So, I totally have to agree there as far as having a good mentor, whether in education or out there in industry, is very helpful.
Thank you all. That was great and valuable information. This is another general question starting with Professor Conover. What study habits should students develop in order to be successful in your field?
Well, one of the things that Kevin mentioned a few minutes ago was not, staying away from the material for a week. I mean, I've always, early in the class, I'm always telling the students, don't fall behind, keep up, because every time we meet, we're building on what we learned the previous meeting. And if you fall behind, you just get further and further behind. It gets hard to catch up. And so you have to be very disciplined, have a regular study schedule. And he'd also mentioned, working with other people. So study groups is really great. It's more difficult to do that in this environment, but I've been surprised that office hours, or I learned from a colleague a couple of years ago that we call them now student hours, because it sounds more welcoming to the students. The idea is to get them to not think they're bothering you. You're there for the student, but regular study habits and it's really a great resource, is that it's so easy to meet with instructors here compared to four-year colleges and universities. So take advantage of that. And it's really best if you can study, for my class, every day. If you can't do every day, every other day. But if you can't, learn the material a few hours before a test. That's a recipe for failure.
What about you, Professor Neufeld?
Yeah, I'll just repeat what Keith just said. Yeah, you just got to stay current with the material. That's probably the most important thing. I mean, that's true of any subject, really, but we say, like, especially with STEM, but I mean, really, that's true for any subject. I mean, obviously the basics, just go to class. So many students just don't come to class, and it's like, just go to class. You learn so much just going to class and paying attention. Even if you think you're not, like, you are, go to class. And then, yeah, just working on the homework every day. You can't put it off. Because yeah, the next lecture, there's going to be new material based on the previous night's homework. And if you haven't done it, it's not going to make sense. And yeah, also like what Keith said, office hours, if you have questions or are stuck, yeah, especially at a community college, it's so much easier to talk to the faculty here than, at the UCs, like, you rarely even see the professors. They delegate all their work to the TAs. And so you're lucky to even see a professor at a UC. Yeah, office hours, tutoring center. When I was a student, I spent a lot of time in the tutoring center getting help from the TAs. So yeah, I would say, just to sum up, yeah, go to class, obviously, stay current with the homework. And if you have questions, office hours, tutoring center, and yeah, and your peers, you can also get a lot of help with your peers in the class.
Thank you so much for that response. So for our next question, this is from a student. How can we make our applications for UCs more appealing, since there are so many people applying with STEM majors? I don't know who wants to take this.
I feel like I should probably jump in for that one. I do a lot of transfer. Yeah. The main thing is understanding the internal logic at each campus and how they do admissions. Because some schools don't read your personal statement. They just look at, did you take the right courses and what grades that you had? Other schools look at other things. Now, other things you should be doing for your longer term goals. And by other things, I mean your extracurricular, your volunteer stuff, working with the hospital, maybe writing extra research papers with professors. So don't do it to look good for the next level. Do it because it's going to help you develop those skills. And when you're writing your personal statements, you'll have something more to talk about. that work at the pharmacy, that work at the chem lab, things like that. And just because not all programs are difficult to get into in the sciences. Some sciences, I mean, it's difficult to maintain a higher GPA with STEM, but sometimes it's not like a 3.9. Sometimes 3.0, 3.2 will get you into a pretty good UC. So just because you hear about one school and what they need, just know that another school is not as competitive, and no one knows this. Some schools with actually good programs, 2.5 might get you in some really good programs out there. So use the transfer center for the specifics and strategies. And when you work with us, we have a full-on strategy. Competitive schools, some moderate competitive schools, and then your safety schools. And in the end, at least you'll know you got into the most competitive school that you could, and then you decide which is the right path for you. Because for grad school stuff, they do look at the competitive nature of where you go, but we don't want to stress too much about that. We just want to get the best grades possible, strategic decisions, understand the logic, and then work with the counselors in the transfer center to package and scene. There you go. And if any instructors want to add to that too, just in their classroom, what they might.
Okay, if not, thank you, Kevin.
I'll mention two things. At Glendale College, we do have some programs that are not common at other community colleges. There's some research opportunities. And so in biology, we have an internship at the Natural History Museum, where you actually work with scientists, curators at the Natural History Museum to do research, some of which has been published. We also have a Bio 298, where students get to apply what they learn in microbiology, and in my class, Bio 101, they get to do bacteriological research, in the lab. And I know that when those students are transferring to UC, the faculty at the UC are impressed by what our students are doing. And they have a similar research program in the chemistry department that I'm less familiar with, but it looks very good on your applications to have that experience, the research.
Yeah. Particularly for UCLA and Berkeley, because they do look at that. I mean, it's one thing to write your statement saying, I love science, I really love science, I really, 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 really love science. I mean, that's kind of what some people are writing, right? So in a different way. But those who have the internship, I really love science so much so I did something outside the classroom. And that's really a big component for an LA or Berkeley or USC.
Thank you for that. Moving on to our next question. A lot of students are interested in going to college to further their careers in the STEM field. How can students make themselves more marketable to employers and get a job after graduation? How can we find internships in the STEM world?
Okay, I'll mention something here. So when I was applying for jobs, the #1 job skill that employers want is programming. If you know how to program, you'll find a job. And so when, I guess when students ask me about recommendations for, I guess, job skills that a math major should have, yeah, programming. If you know just even a little bit of computer science, that goes a long way. Yeah, a really hot field right now is data science. In fact, I know at Irvine, there's even a major now. You can major in data science, which that wasn't a thing when I was in school. Sometimes I always think if I were to go back to school, I don't actually know if I would have done math. I would maybe double major in computer science and statistics if I could go back and do it again. But there's so many jobs out there for programmers. And in fact, I just kind of anecdotally, I have a few friends who were math majors, but then kind of taught themselves programming, and they both, well, okay, it's a little misleading. So one of my friends, he was a math major, but he has his PhD in math. He works at Google now, but the point is, like, so he studied computer science basically, and so and then another person I know, she was a math major, and then she was looking for a job, and so she just taught herself just on her spare time how to program. So I would say a job skill, programming, computer science. If you know how to program, that'll really go a long way.
I'd like to, excuse me, I'd like to mention, what I had talked about before. Again, getting back to a computer skill of some sort with a software program. Mr. Neufeld had mentioned about, programming. And from my standpoint in mechanical design, again, having the CAD and drafting skills, and being very competent with these will really help out in, having the opportunity to get an internship, because the last thing that they want to do when they're taking somebody on in an internship is have to teach them everything. They have to know a particular skill. So that's very important. It's very important, not only from the standpoint for moving on and doing well in your university projects, for whatever your discipline is, having the skill that's used within the industry for, getting an internship, that you come with, some ammunition, with these skills that you can provide to the employer, to help out. And even, part-time, work or full-time work. There is a lot of jobs out there for technologists. And the one thing I want to mention is that I actually get back always, every year I always get back university graduates that have gone through engineering programs. Places that I like are like, say, Cal Poly, more of a pragmatic approach, only because that's what I am more of. I'm not more of a theorist. But I was going to say that in this case, they're coming back without any CAD skills. They've had so much theory, and they're not able to get a job. They can do lots of math problems, they can do a lot of physics, they can do their chemistry, but they can't get on a computer, they can't design anything, they can't engineer anything, because the programs, whether it's been computer aided design or computer aided engineering, programs, they have not been, they've not had enough time on it, they don't have enough skill, and they're actually not employable. And so I just can't recommend, having a certain, set of fundamental industry skills that go with this. Of course, all the fundamentals academically are extremely important, but, as far as, I guess addressing the internship, you have to have a good set of, computer skills.
Just a practical piece that goes along with everything. I agree with everything we just heard, but in arts, everyone's got a portfolio. It's a no-brainer. That should apply to STEM for sure. I've talked to many, many people that hire engineers, that hire programmers, whatever. They say, great, I can look at the transcript in 30 seconds. I have a little mental checklist. Sounds good. You got all this, you got all that. Now tell me about something you've built that you didn't have to build. Something you've made, be it data science in Richard's example, you need a GitHub portfolio, right? You need to show the projects that you've built. You can't just say, I took a class in Python and I can do that. No, I need to see a project that I've built. Similarly, what Tom was talking about, those skills are hugely important, and you can showcase them through a portfolio. Come in with something you've made, right? Get it printed, design it and print it and bring it into an interview and say, I designed this and I drew it in CAD and here it is. So there's versions of that everywhere. We don't think of a portfolio as much when it comes to STEM, but it's as important as if you're an artist.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you everyone. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. If you had any questions that we did not answer during this workshop session, please email what will be sent into the chat and we will try to get your questions answered. If you have not filled out the survey in the chat, please do so when you leave. And we have a few more workshops this week. If you're curious to know about other learning and professional pathways, we encourage you all to join us at those. Please visit associatedstudentsgcc.com or our Instagram at as.gcc for more information. Wishing everyone is staying safe and will enjoy the upcoming holiday seasons. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.